Yasodanandana bhajan janaranjana Yamuna tira vanachari Yamuna tira Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yasodanandana Brajan Janaranjana Yasodanandana Brajan Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Banachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Kunja Bihari Srila Prabhupada ki jai Gantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai Gopanandi Hari Hari Bol Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're reading Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, status quo. Chapter 16, Jai and Vijay cursed by the sages. Text number 30. Yep. Etat puraiva nirdishtam. Etat puraiva nirdishtam. Ramaya krudaya jada. Ramaya Krudaya Yada Pura Pavarita Dwari Pura Pavarita Dwari Vishantimaya Uparate Vishantimaya Uparate Etat Puraeva Nirdishtam Ramaya Krudaya Yada Purapavarita Dwari Vishantimai Uparate Etat Puraiva Nirdishtam Ramaya Krudaya Vada Vishantimai Uparate. Ladies. Etat, this departure, Pura, formerly, Eva, certainly, Nirdishtam, foretold, Ramaya, by Lakshmi, Krudaya, furious, Yada, when, Pura, previously, Apavarita, prevented, Dwari, at the gate, Vishanti, entering, Mai, as I, Uparate, was resting. Translation. This departure from Vaikuntha was foretold by Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune. She was very angry because when she left my abode and then returned, you stopped her at the gate while I was sleeping. So this verse doesn't have purport, so we'll read the next one, text 31. Mayi samramba yogena nistidya brahma helanam pratyeshatam nikasham me kalinalpi yasha punaha. Word by word. Mayi unto me samramba yogena, by practice of misty yoga in anger, nistidya, being liberated from Brahma helanam, a result of disobedience to the Brahmanas. Pratyeshatam, will come back. Nikasham, near. Me. Kalena, in due course of time. Alpiyasha, very short. Punaha, again. Translation, please repeat. The Lord assured the two Vaikuntha inhabitants, Jaya and Vijaya, by practicing the mystic yoga system. In anger, you will be cleansed of the sin of disobeying the Brahmanas, and within a very short time, return to me. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The Supreme Personality of Godhead advised the two doorkeepers, Jai and Vijay, that by dint of bhakti yoga in anger, they would be delivered from the curses of the Brahmanas. Srila Madhva Muni remarks in this connection that by practicing bhakti yoga, one can become free from all sinful reactions. Even a Brahma Sapa, or curse by a Brahmana, which cannot be overcome by any other means, can be overcome by bhakti yoga. One can practice bhakti yoga in many rasas. Rasas means taste, or flavors, or mellows. There are 12 rasas, 5 primary and 7 secondary. The 5 primary rasas constitute direct bhakti yoga. But although the 7 secondary rasas are indirect, they are also counted within bhakti yoga. He's saying that because anger is one of the secondary rasas. If they are used in the service of the Lord. In other words, bhakti yoga is all-inclusive. If one somehow or other becomes attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he becomes engaged in bhakti yoga, as described in Srimad Bhagavatam 10:29-15, Kaman Krodam Bayam. The gopis were attracted to Krishna by bhakti yoga in a relationship of lusty desires, kama. Similarly, Kamsa was attached to bhakti yoga by dint of fear of his death. Thus, bhakti yoga is so powerful that even becoming an enemy of the Lord and always thinking of Him can deliver one very quickly. It is said, Vishnu Vaktash Smrito Daiva Ashuras Tat Vipanyayaha. Devotees of Lord Vishnu are called demigods, whereas non-devotees are called asuras. But bhakti yoga is so powerful that both demigods and asuras can derive its benefits if they always think of the personality of Godhead. The basic principle of bhakti yoga is to think of the Supreme Lord always. I'll repeat. The basic principle of bhakti yoga is to think of the Supreme Lord always. The Lord says in the Bhagavad Gita 18:65, Manmana bhavamad bhaktu. Always think of me. It doesn't matter which way one thinks. The very thought of the personality of Godhead is the basic principle of bhakti yoga. In the material planets, there are different grades of sinful activities, of which disrespecting a Brahmana or a Vaishnava is the most sinful. Here it is clearly stated that one can overcome even that grave sin simply by thinking of Vishnu, not even favorably, but in anger. Thus, even those who are not devotees always think of Vishnu. Thus, even if those who are not devotees always think of Vishnu, they become free from all sinful activities. Krishna consciousness is the highest form of thought. Lord Vishnu is thought of in this age by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. From the statements of the Bhagavatam, it appears that if one thinks of Krishna, even as an enemy, that particular qualification, thinking of Vishnu or Krishna, cleanses one of all sins. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandjana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pachadine Nirvisesha Sunyavari Paschatyadesh Tarine. So, this is what could be called an exceptional verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Every verse we can say is exceptional, but this particular verse is quite exceptional for a few reasons. We'll explain that, try to, by the grace of Guru Krishna, the Vaishnavas. Here the topic is anger, we may say. That's the issue. And in fact, if we zoom out, if we see the broad picture, anger and other items in material life are the cause of a lot of trouble. And you may recall your adventures in life whenever you get angry or lusty or greedy. There was some trouble, right? That's how the pastime goes, right? Those are not pastimes, are tragedies. A friend used to say, Krishna has pastimes. But that's the lesson, that's the objective. To understand that there are things which are detrimental for our spiritual life. And pretty much no one is exempt from them. That's what it is. If we indulge in these detrimental sort of attitudes, behaviors, even thoughts, we will face some problem. That's the simple rule of thumb. So here the sages, who are the sages? The Kumaras. And the sages became angry, right? They became angry, why? Because the doorkeepers didn't allow them to enter. I don't know if you have experienced those things, but in India, for example, in Mayapur, mainly because it's so big and so many people come, sometimes the guards are there in the temple and they forcibly, stop you or push you, right? I remember the last time when I went to live in Mayapur for a number of years, and I haven't lived for a couple decades there. So the guards didn't know me, right? Or they didn't, knew who I was. So they will stop me, yeah? And then I'll go like, no, but I'm serving Jayapataka Maharaj, or I have some responsibility, or have something to do, and they will stop you. And then you have to queue, go at the back of 300-400 people, right, to enter. And I remember many times getting so angry at that and trying to make a fuss and no, but I'm going to call this and da-da-da. Eventually I learned that it's best to become friends with everybody, and then they get to know you and then, okay, Prabhu, no problem, come. But what happens is that when anger is there, it's generally because our false ego has been poked somehow, right? Like when somebody steps on your toes, right? You have noticed that? Even accidentally, you get, hey, what are we doing? Be careful. So the problem with these items, angers and others, is that trigger us, and then we respond generally in the wrong way. Unless you're very, very advanced, unless you're very, very tolerant, unless you're a true Vaishnava, then you may be karunika, titikshava, all these qualities, and then you are like, it's okay, thank you for stepping on my toes. But generally that's not the response. So here, if we take this section of verses in context, then we see that the objective, the learning objective, is that we understand that anger is something very, very detrimental for our spiritual life. Creates a lot of problems. In fact, the whole Bhagavatam, we can say in Prabhupada comments at the end of the first canto, started, the saga of the Bhagavatam, right? Parikshit Maharaj was a young and successful and fortunate, blissful, the grandson of the Pandavas. He was the grandson of Arjuna, the one who received the Gita. And he was doing his duties. He was checking things out, what's going on. And then he arrived at the ashram of Samika Muni. Is that correct? Samika? Yeah? And then, as we heard many times, the sage was meditating and he was not in contact with his external senses. And then he didn't notice. So then Parikshit Maharaj got angry. He got triggered. So What did he do? Oh, that's the way you honor me? Okay, this is the way I'm going to honor you. So he pulled out his sword and picked up a dry skin of a snake and put it. Imagine if somebody comes and puts you. You've seen sometimes the dry snakes and puts that on you. How would you feel? You should die in 7 days or shorter. So that's what happens, right? So Parikshit Maharaj, by the arrangement of the providence, the Bhagavatam says, got angry. And then the sage was totally aloof. He was cool. He was no worries, as they say here. But then what happens when his son, what was his name? Shringi boy. Brahmana Prabhupada says, the Shringi boy, Brahmana boy. He heard that his father has been insulted in this way. He got angry. He got really angry. But he was a Brahmana. He was a Brahmana boy. He was trained in the duties of a Brahmana. And the Shastras, the scriptures, the Vedas explain that there are certain things that Brahmins or those who are meant to take on spiritual life have to do. One of them is to study Shastra. The other one is to teach Shastra. Do pujas, engage people in puja, worshiping the deities, do jagyas, and benefit everyone by doing jagyas or sacrifices. Those are the duties of the Brahmins, or the teachers. Those who are aiming for understanding Brahman or the spirit, the supreme spirit, Param Brahma. So when he got angry, then, as the saying goes, all hell broke loose, right? The emperor of the planet, not only of a certain region, but of the whole planet, was meant to die in 7 days. What a tragedy. Huh? So, beautiful purpose that Prabhupada gives to that pastimes. And he says a few quite heavy statements. He says that Kali Yuga begins when Brahmanas lose their cool. I'm paraphrasing. When Brahmanas do not behave as Brahmanas. That's what Kali Yuga means. Brahmanas are meant to represent humanity. These are the example, these are the models. Jat acharati shrestha. Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita, I believe 3:21, that these are the models, and when the models of humanity fail, then everything goes to ruination. Everything gets ruined like that. Everything is a spoil like that. And that's Kali Yuga. So the basic point of that instance is that anger destroys everything. Krishna says something similar in one of the warnings that he gives in the Bhagavad Gita at the end of chapter 3. And Krishna, in the beginning, the first chapters, he gives warnings to us practitioners through the agency of Arjuna. And one of the warnings in chapter 3 is lust. When Arjuna asked Krishna, towards the end of chapter 3, he says, why do we fall? Why do we commit mistakes? Even if we don't want, sometimes you are dragged, he says, like by force. Somebody who's bigger than you or more powerful or more skilled, they just drag you, put some technique, grab you here, push you aside, and you don't know, you don't have a chance. So in the same way, Arjuna asked, why, although sometimes we don't want to commit that mistake or do this wrong thing or whatever, why do we act like that? So Krishna, in where is it? 3:37, he says clearly, Kama esha, Krodha esha. And Krodha means anger. And if anything, I think this is 30, right? This is 30, correct? Okay, so in the second line, the second word. Can you see it? Krudaya. Krudaya comes from Kroda. Krudaya means someone who's manifesting Kroda. Krudaya. And what is the translation for Krudaya? Anybody remembers? You're reading. I was about to say you have taken your warm milk. Prabhupada says you want to improve your memory, drink hot milk at night. So, Krudaya. Mother Lakshmi was very, very angry. And he says, furious. Prabhupada translates, furious. So whenever we see anger, that's a big problem. And then we see throughout the Bhagavatam, in fact, we can say, with all due respect, the Bhagavatam is a book of problems, right? Partly. Because it's like a coin. Coin has two sides. So on one side you have problems, on the other side is the solution. So those problems are there so we can get the ultimate solution. Sabai pumsam paro dharmo. The highest solution, the Shreyas, what it's the best. Where is it? Yeah, that word is used repeatedly by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. What is the best thing? That's what the sages ask Sutta Goswami. That's what Arjuna asked Krishna. What is best for me? And in simple terms, without going too deep, in simple terms, the first best thing is to control those urges. One of them, anger. That's one of the main or the first basic teachings of the Gita. And Krishna says, and he uses this word repeatedly also in the Gita, in his early teachings. Where is it? Right there. Amazing. Vittaraga vajakroda manmaya mam upashritaha bahavo jnana tapasha puttamat bhavam agataha. In the 4th chapter, Transcendental Knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, for the first time in the book, there's a beautiful sequence of teachings in the Gita. Krishna starts talking about himself for a few verses only, right? Then he goes back to the lecture that he's giving to Arjuna. And when he talks about himself, he's explaining to Arjuna that we are not equal. I'm superior, I'm supreme. And I appear from time to time, explains the reasons. But most importantly, what we're looking for here is the importance of being cleansed of krodha. Vittaraga vajakroda. So the translation to that is, Krishna says, being freed from attachment, fear and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me. Many, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attain transcendental love for me. So many verses where Krishna uses that word, krodha. And Bhagavatam also explains that. So, what is the purpose of us being here? What is the purpose of us reading Bhagavatam, hearing these pastimes, hearing about how the Brahmanas became angry and cursed Jai and Vijay. And then it's quite interesting, this pastime, because then, in one sense, we may say, I don't want to pollute the atmosphere, but as you know, in history, sometimes there are these cruelties of war, right? And when they are held or try to hold accountable, these people who have killed a lot of enemies of their enemies, then they say, we were following orders, right? That's one of the excuses. I was following order, like that. So, we may say, Jaya and Vijaya, we're just following orders because they are meant to check, right? But in any case, the whole thing is that this is the desire of Krishna, that this problem happened. It was the desire of Krishna that Arjuna got confused. Why? Because by him being confused, then he had the opportunity or the environment, the stage, right, the context in which he can teach his Bhagavad Gita and help us. Every time we get confused, every time we lament, every time we don't want to do our duty, then we just go back to the Bhagavad Gita. Do your duty. Huh? Do whatever you have to do just for the sake of doing it, for pleasing me. Not for your senses, not for what the world would say. Do it for me. That's what Krishna is telling Arjuna. So in this case, of course, it's much more of a complex pastime. And this is only the background. The pastime hasn't really started in one sense just yet, because the pastime is when Hiranyakashipu attacks Lord Krishna, and then Krishna appears in the form of Nishingadev. He attacks, Prahlad Maharaj, the devotee of Krishna, and then Krishna appears to protect him. Right? Like often I say, the Bhagavad Gita is the basics, and it's like an image that is projected. So the image might be, remember in the good old days, those who are old enough, when I think it was Kodak who brought out one of the first projectors, and then you put the photos on those kind of slides, right? And then there's a circle thing, you put all those slides, and then you project it, and the whole thing turned bigger. Now we don't even know how it works, but it's so seamlessly. So it's like a projection. So Krishna is talking in the Bhagavad Gita about many things. One of the things is how demons, right? He dedicates a whole chapter, the almost entirety of the 16th chapter, to describe the demons, right? But there is no examples. Bhagavad Gita, there's no time. The word is about to start. There's no time. So the examples are given in the Bhagavatam. So here, is it the first demon that appears? The first demon, right? So they are appearing now, because if we backpedal a little, this whole story of them being conceived and what happened before they're being conceived is told right now. Why? Because the devatas, they are really concerned because the earth the universe is being affected by the potency of these two demons, Jai and Vijay, right? And they are concerned. So they go to Lord Brahma and they ask him, what's going on? Everything it's being, dark, and right? Everything, it's out of place. Something is wrong. Yeah? So they were very, very worried and fearful. So they go and ask their superior, the father, the guru, the teacher, the leader. And he starts telling the story. This is actually what happened. You have to understand, to pacify them. Very beautiful. I was reading some purports ahead, where Prabhupada says, this is, so many things are taught in Bhagavatam with these little pastimes. He says, this is the process to pacify the mind. Whenever we are disturbed, what we have to do is to go to our superior. And then the superior will tell you, explain things as they are, and then you will be pacified. And then at the end, the devatas say, okay, this is what Krishna wants. Okay, the storm is coming. We just have to brace ourselves, wait for it, and it will pass, and everything will be glorious. Krishna will be pleased, etc. So the point is, we need to be careful with the matter of anger and other things, but in this case, anger. Now, there is another layer to this verse, and that's why I said in the beginning that this verse is exceptional. And of course, giving a class in this environment sometimes is quite difficult, because we have some of you are very new, maybe a few days or a few weeks attending these classes, and it might be a bit too complicated to understand everything that is said. And then we have senior devotees who have been here for decades, and then you have to present also something that it's not too basic, right? So it is a challenge to give Srimad Bhagavatam class in this context. But the uniqueness of this verse, particularly 31, you don't have it in front of you. I'm going to read it again. It says, the Lord assured the two Vaikuntha inhabitants, Jai and Vijay, by practicing the mystic yoga system in anger, you will be cleansed of the sin of disobeying the Brahmanas, and within a very short time return to me. Now, I really learned something after all these years, is to stay away from controversy. I got too much involved in controversy in my early years in the movement, so I just, anything controversial, I just try to avoid. But this is a healthy controversy, shall we say, or almost a contradiction that we find in this verse. Why? Because Prabhupada says that, as Krishna is saying, that by doing this service, shall we say, in anger, they will be purified. Right? And within a very short time, return to me. Now, this may present, as I said, a bit of a contradiction. Why? Because these same people, in this case, Hiranyakashipu, for example, it's mentioned in Nectar of Devotion by Srila Prabhupada. And I have a quote here. I was researching. It's not considered devotional service. So how is it that it is devotional service, right? It is bhakti, and it is cleansing to the point that in a very short time they will come back. And on the other hand, the acharyas, Rupa Goswami, Jiva Goswami, Srila Prabhupada, directly say this is not considered bhakti. That's the subtlety of this instruction. Now, I spent some time reading about it because that was the first thing that struck me when Daksha told me that I have to give class. So I quickly went and started looking around. I said, but this is... But actually, this is what it is. That for the sake of us learning how to practice pure devotional service, as Rupa Goswami defines in the beginning of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, what Prabhupada summarized and commented as the nectar of devotion, is for us to understand that such behaviors are behaviors not to be imitated. Right? This is what's called, you learn from bad examples. This is what's called a bad example. Right? Hiranyakashipu trying to kill the Supreme Person. Hiranyaksha trying to attack and fight, engage in fighting inimically with Lord Varaha is not something that we need to, don't try at home, they say, right? Don't try at home, okay? So for the sake of us learning, we have to understand that anger is something that we need to purify. And yes, we have the examples every time, not every time, but sometimes when Prabhupada mentions anger, he will say a word that he liked very much, dovetail, right? Dovetail. That means to engage, to channel into Krishna service. And he will quote, he will refer to, mention devotees. For example, who are a couple of them that serve Krishna with anger? Who are those? No, but when serving Krishna, not this is against Krishna. He will quote Arjuna, Hanuman, for example. He says, anger is good if it's used for the pleasure of Krishna, right? Because the word that Rupa Goswami used is favorably. I think it's anakulena, if I'm not mistaken. What's that verse? Anyas chintayanto mam jayanasparu. No. Anyavilasita sunyam jnana karmadi anavaritam anukulyena krishnano shilanam bhaktir uttamam. Rupa Goswami begins pretty much his teachings in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the Nectar of Devotion, explaining that pure devotional service is an attitude that it's favorable towards the Lord. I want to do this to please you. That's crucial, and he comments on that. Jiva Goswami comments on that. The Acharyas have commented on that. So it's favorable. So, and the warning is that examples such as Kamsa, Hiranyakashipu, and I forgot the others, I have it here, are not to be followed. That's not considered devotional service. Prabhupada says directly, verbatim. That's what he says. So the way to reconcile this apparently contradictory statement is by understanding that this is something that we are not meant to do. Okay, we are not meant to like that. However, that's the beauty of the Bhakti Shastras and the Vedic system. There are always exceptions and norms and rules and things like that. There are devotees who have pleased the Lord by acting in anger. Not the ones that I mentioned, of course, Arjuna, Hanuman, but there are others as well. Anyone that you can think of? Hanuman? No, but that's in favor of Krishna. Someone against Krishna. Famous. Who? Kamsa, yeah, Kamsa is in the same category as Hiranyakashipu and Yaksha, like that. But for example, Bhishmadev, right? Bhishmadev fought with the Lord, right? But it's amazing because, and if you read, what is it? Chapter 9, correct? Chapter 9, the passing away of Bhishmadev. It's so beautiful, such a beautiful chapter. Particularly Prabhupada, it's amazing. It's like Prabhupada knew when he describes in his purport, Prabhupada knew what Bhishmadev was thinking. He knew what was in his heart. It's incredible. And surely you must have seen, there's the picture of Krishna. You may have seen it when Bhishmadev was able to break Arjuna's chariot wheels. And there's this picture, this painting, this depiction where Krishna is running and his chadar, his shawl has fallen, right? And he grabbed the wheel of the chariot and he's about to throw it to Bhishma, right? So he broke his promise for the sake of his devotee, and he's about to throw it like this, yeah? Beautiful. And then you see Bhishmadev, he's just standing like so pleased. So Prabhupada explains in those purports that he's offering in the mood of, or in the rasa of anger, is just like the what do you call those? Love bites, yeah? That the lover may inflict on the beloved, right? Why? Because Bhishmadev was throwing arrows at Krishna. Imagine that, and Krishna doesn't bleed, right? Is that one of the definitions? Krishna doesn't bleed, but for the sake of the pastime, he was bleeding. There were drops of blood. Imagine, but there were. Prabhupada describes that Krishna's body was decorated because everything was for the pleasure of the Lord in that spirit of Kshatriya. Huh? Imagine, Krishna wanted to have a real good fight, so he chose Bhishmadev to inflict, apparently, externally, some wounds on him, because then he wanted to relish that, and Bhishmadev knew that. His mood is exemplary because he understood what Krishna wanted, and he's pleasing him in that way. Huh? Incredible. It's just mind-blowing. Like Ravindra Sarup Prabhu says, he has a PhD doctorate in philosophy and religion, history of religion, I believe. And he says, no other religion presents such things. Explaining how Krishna feels, how Krishna thinks, how the devotees understand what Krishna is thinking. I mean, he's a real person. He's not, Prabhupada didn't use the word personality just for the sake of it, just to, make it flowery. Oh, personality of God. No, he has a personality. We all have personalities, and we are quite complex. We may have good things, and we have our, other things, right? Quirks, etc. Krishna is a personality, and he often wrote Supreme Personality of Godhead. And I have said this a couple of times, but I remember when the first time I got the Bhagavad Gita, and my best friend told me, if you have any intelligence, read this book. And sure enough, I read for 4 days non-stop, trying to defeat his challenge or his poking me. And at that point, I have concluded there is no God. I had a very eloquent Marxist brackets teacher, professor, and he was teaching us economy. And then he just convinced me with his arguments. So when I was reading the Bhagavad Gita for the first time, I said, I'm going to read it, but I'm not going to acknowledge the word God, right? Or Godhead, as Prabhupada uses. But then he will use the Supreme Personality of Godhead, right? So many times in the Bible. I read the abridged version because it was the Spanish version, and there's the abridged version that Prabhupada criticizes in the beginning of, I think it's a preface or introduction, where he says the Macmillan Company printed the abridged version of my book. In fact, I have commented on practically every verse. So I read that version that was translated into Spanish, and it was God, Godhead, God, Godhead, Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it was just like those, in athletics, you have those jumps, and you have the triple jump or long jump or whatever they are called. So you just run, and then you just jump really, really, long like that. So I was just hopping over these words, God, Godhead, Supreme Personality of God. I just didn't want to hear it. I don't want to read it. I don't want to see it. We're just jumping. But the amazing thing, and this is something that, like the magician has his tricks. And I think Prabhupada had many tricks. And I don't know how conscious he was, because he often said that these books weren't written by him, were written by Krishna himself, that Krishna dictated every single word. But the Bhagavad Gita, and in general we may say Prabhupada's books are so powerful because it's not only God presented. Because God is there, the supremacy is there, as you know, the middle section of the Bhagavad Gita, knowledge of the Absolute, who's the boss, etc., the opulence of the Absolute, the universal form and all those things. God is there. Okay, I accept God. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to surrender to Him, is it? God is there, okay, let Him do His thing, let the sun come up and the moon, and let the oxygen be there for free, and the oceans, and let me enjoy my part. I want to do my thing. I have my program. But the important thing of these books are that they present, how can we say, the heart of the devotee, right? And Indradyumna Maharaj gives a beautiful example. He says that this, what was it, Bhagavati, that Prabhupada used to argue with this Indian man in Juhu, yes? Yeah, I don't know if it was Dr. Patel. Bhagavad Ji. Anyway, Bhagavad Ji, that's it. So he was very close friend with Prabhupada, and Prabhupada sometimes will tease him, and sometimes these Bhagavad Ji will tease Prabhupada back, right? Like that. They will go back and forth, arguing about this, impersonalism, this, that. Sometimes they'll swap sides, and they will, like that, Prabhupada liked to exercise his argumentative muscle, for the sake of Krishna, right? And also he was a person, right? So he liked to have a good fight, as I don't know who was giving the class the other day that was mentioning the Mumbai issue. So Bhagavad Ji, when he was about to pass, he called for the devotees. And Indradyumna Swami happened to be in Vrindavan at that time, or somewhere in India, I forgot exactly. And then he said that Look, I'm going to tell you something that Prabhupada Ji told me. He said that sometimes the story goes that when he was in the Atlantic Ocean, right? That he was about to die because he had a heart attack. And then at some point and there is some drawings about that Krishna is pulling the boat, etc. Right? And there are some pictures and Krishna is there and the incarnations are there. Have you seen that one? So he said to Indradhyumna Maharaj that when that happened, I knew that the end was close. And he said, that's what Bhagavad Gita told Indradhyumna Swami, that's what Indradhyumna Swami tells. Krishna touched my heart and pacified me. He said, like everything is going to be fine. Like when friends come and they say, no, it's okay. There are even some studies for people who are dying, people who are sick. The human touch. Right? So he's a person. So he said that Prabhupada told him that Krishna touched my heart. He says, everything is going to be fine. Yeah. But he said, but I shouldn't say these things. So I'm just telling you. It was at the end, last days or so. So when Bhagavad Ji was passing, he said, Swamiji told me not, Prabhupada Ji told me not to say. But just like him, when he was passing, I have to say it to someone. I cannot die with this. They say, take it to the grave. So I'm telling you. I heard Indradhyumna Swami tell this story. And Maharaj further elaborates on that point, and he says that just like Prabhupada's heart was touched by Krishna, in the same way, he has poured his heart out in the Bhagavatam. So, in the Bhagavatam, it's not only, shall we say, that we learn about the supremacy of the Lord, but we learn about the devotion, the love, the surrendering of his devotees. And that is very contagious. And if you listen long enough, attentively enough, to those explanations that Srila Prabhupada gives in his purports, then your heart will be infected. Right? And you will want to eventually, and I don't know your progress, your journey to Krishna consciousness, but I can say, and I heard many devotees saying something similar, the thought of, I want to be something like that, close to it. Even you don't realize it. Slowly, you start becoming attracted to the way of the Vaishnavas, the way that they feel, the way that they talk, the way that they act, the way that they serve, the way that they love the Supreme Lord. And that is the most powerful thing. And that's what the purpose of Srila Prabhupada are. Let's not get caught up so much in the sometimes details, and even Bhaktivinoda Thakur warns us in the fascinating details of the pastimes. But let's go deep into what are the messages, what are the examples that Krishna is giving us through the agency of his devotees, and particularly to the words of Srila Prabhupada in his purports. Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Any questions, any points? We have 2 minutes. I don't know if there is a active mic.
Hare Krishna. Prabhu, can you expand on Bhagavad Gita as a projection?
The other way.
Intrigued by that comparison. Bhagavad Gita as a projection.
Yeah, the projection is the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavad Gita is the essence. The projection is the Bhagavatam. Where are the examples of the demons in the Bhagavad Gita? There's no examples. Huh? Where are the examples of us falling prey of lust in the Gita? There's no examples. He just mentions it, right? The warnings the doubts, lust, anger. The examples are in the Bhagavatam. Indra becomes very lusty, and then he gets covered with ice. People gets very angry. Different pastimes. All the pastimes of the Bhagavatam are, shall we say, nothing else but an explanation or an exemplification, I don't know if that's the right word, of what Krishna is saying. Everything comes from Krishna, right? And he summarized everything in 4 verses, not only in Bhagavad Gita, but also in Srimad Bhagavatam. And everything else is expanded from those few words. So Bhagavad Gita is 700 verses. Multiply that, I think, 25 times. That's Srimad Bhagavatam, right? And then expanded with Prabhupada's purpose, right? Now Prabhupada says, if we read these books, his books, for 12 years and follow everything purely, everything that comes out from our mouth will be pure and transcendental. Pure and transcendental. Right? One time, one Swami was quoting that and giving the references. And we all, like he read our minds, we all were thinking, how many years I have here? Okay, I joined this year. This is decades ago. And then he said, when are you going to start? And that burst our bubble. Because I was thinking, I'm 7 years, 8 years, okay. He says, when are you going to start? And I remember that. We need to start. I'm talking for myself, sorry everyone. I'm not implying anything. And scrutinizing the read Prabhupada's books in association with devotees and applying every single word of it as much as possible in this lifetime. And when Prabhupada said that, and then your life will be perfected, and at the end of it, you'll go back to a Godhead. And I remember hearing one Mate from Argentina that went to see him in Venezuela, and when he said, in this lifetime, and then she said, in this lifetime? And Prabhupada turned around, in this lifetime. Like so emphatic, assertive. That's what I can say. The bird has just this much length in its wings, so I cannot say anything else. I don't know if the Prabhus want to expand something. Gita and Bhagavatam being a projection. Prabhu agrees, so if that's okay. Yeah? Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari.